Jay Horwitz with another edition of Amazing Mets Conversations with my old friend, Davey Johnson. Davey, you realize we've known each other now for 42 years. The first time that we met, you probably don't remember, it was during the strike year in 1981. I was going down to Jackson, Mississippi. You managed the Jackson Mets. You took us to a steakhouse in Jackson. There were 14 to 15 people there. I was going to be the big man, put on my Mets credit card. Unfortunately, I lost my wallet, and you paid. I think you said something typical New Yorker, right? I mean, it got better after that, though, Davey. We had to share a lot of good meals together. The other thing, Landmark, 40 years ago this October, we hired you during the middle of the Philly-Baltimore series. I remember your opening remarks at the press conference where when Frank announced you, Frank Cashin, you said, "Why did it take me so long to hire me, Frank?" Remember that, Davey?
Yeah, I remember. I also said I like to work with smart people.
You had just come off, winning a championship at Norfolk, Tidewater, you won a championship at Jackson. To do that. Did you think that the success would come that quickly? I mean, the Mets really were a bad team for a number of years. I mean, really, 73 was the last time they were in the playoff. I mean, you managed a lot of these guys in the minors. Did you think your first year in 84 win 90 games? Did you think it would happen that quickly?
Yes, I did. I had some great managers. I mean, Earl Weaver was a great manager. I learned a lot from Earl. I was a middle infielder, and I always liked to know, why he was making a pitching change and why he hit somebody else, And I was statistically oriented because I have a BS degree in mathematics. So it was easy for me. And the idea of creating a good team, 84 was a typical year that would happen when you manage a team properly. We were outscored by 18 runs on the whole year. And that year we were 18 games over 500. So you do the math on that. And you say, well, how did that happen? Well, when we had a lead or had a chance to win, I had a group called A, which was my better group of relievers. And when we were behind and looks like we weren't going to, I didn't want to overuse my good ones. Then I would use the guys that weren't as tough to hit. And then when the season was over, I said we need to balance the other side of the bullpen because all pitchers need, basically, in spring training, the pitcher throws one day, rests, throws another the next day. They go through throwing every other day before they even throw batting practice. And starters, they pitch a game, maybe 5 or 6 innings, and they have a day off, then they throw on the side, and then they usually have a 5-man rotation, 2 more days, and then pitch. And so I always wanted to keep them on their regular rest programs. And to do that, I mean, you had to pick guys, that had their rest, and that's what we did. And then when I got a better both sides of the bullpen, then the next year, I think we won 98. Then finally in 86, we won 108.
You were really the forerunner for analytics, right? I remember you being in your office at the computer, plotting things out. I mean, I don't remember a manager doing that at that point. I mean, wouldn't you say that you were the forerunner to all the stuff that's going on today?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was doing that in Shreveport. I was doing that in Rochester or wherever, Norfolk. You keep track of who's successful against certain people and how to position the outfielders and infielders. And that's, I don't have that great a memory, but my computer did. Fact is, as I got higher up, I hired a little programmer to do my input and all that stuff at my direction. And then, of course, when I got to the big leagues, I had the same. I had some young genius mind plug in stuff in my little, and then he would translate it into I call it my pitcher catcher's book, my positioning and all that stuff. I was doing that.
Davey, with all the wins you have, to me what made it so successful is you never always were willing to take a chance, to take a risk. I go a couple of games that I remember go back. We're playing the Pirates, I forget which year it was, and and you had Rusty in the outfield, and you had him flip with Clint Hurdle or something.
Yeah,
Remember that, there was Rusty couldn't run in those days.
right.
And then in the Cincinnati game, the famous Cincinnati game, we had the fight when Eric Davis slid into Ray and Ray clocked him. And a lot of guys left. He wound up with Carter at third base, and Jesse and Roger, Jesse Rusk and Roger McDowell alternating batters. So you're always willing to take a risk and go with your gut, right?
That was a percentage risk, because the reason I kept moving Rusty to left field to right field is I'd have him in left field when the chances were about 75 to 80%, they'd hit it to right field. And then when they came up, they hit it to right to left field. I moved him to right, and didn't work out too good because they hit one to Rusty and caught it.
Yeah, and then I think Roger made the last out, or he caught a ball in the outfield. I mean, Roger and Jesse were two pretty good, athletes. So they did that. Today, let me take him to the spring of '86. We win 98 games the year before. If there had been a wild card, we would have been in practically every year we've been in the playoffs. So I remember your speech like it was yesterday. You said not only are we going to win, we're going to dominate the league. And I remember even some of your own players, they kind of looked at each other. Is he kidding me? I mean, why is he doing that for? You weren't afraid to put pressure on the guys, right, Davey? Because I guess you knew what kind of team you had.
This wasn't really me putting pressure on the players. This was me knowing that I had solid players in every position, and every position player and every pitcher knew exactly their role. The one thing about chemistry, what people don't understand, it's not chemistry from winning. It's chemistry when you have 25 guys in a room and they all know they have their roles. And if it was a utility infielder, his role was knowing he was going to pinch hit, maybe play every once a week or something like that against certain pitchers. And they knew if they did well, I would expand their role. And when everybody on the team knows their role coming out of spring training, exactly their role, and knows that if they do well, I'll expand their roles, then everybody's happy. And that's called chemistry.
Isn't Danny Heat maybe the perfect example of what you're talking about? He had like 4 or 5 pinch hits when he played him. He always did well.
There's no doubt about it. And that was his role, and he knew it, and he was ready for it. I didn't have to look around when his role was coming up, because he already had his gloves on, his bat. He was ready to do it mentally. The object in the big leagues, if you're mentally prepared to do your role, that's as important as being physically prepared.
So that year, the welcome home dinner, we start off 2-3. We lose 3 games in a row. You go up before the crowd that night, 1,000 people, whatever, in a hotel, and you said, "Calm down. We're not going to lose many more games the rest of the year." So we lost the rest of. We lost 51 regular season games the rest of the year, and a couple more in the playoffs. So I think your prediction turned out pretty well.
Yeah, I think so.
For me, what stands out that year in '86 was a sweep in St. Louis. Doesn't Davey? We went in there, and the Cardinals had been our nemesis for so many years. We swept them in 4 games, and that kind of set the tone the whole year.
Well, let me tell you something. I built a fishing camp in Ocala, Florida, on Orange Lake, and I had a house there. And I invited Bill Robinson. He liked to fish, and Mel Stottlemyre, and also invited my buddy Whitey Herzog, because I always watched what Whitey did. In fact, I convinced Frank Cashin to make 2 trades. I convinced him to, number one, Howard Johnson was a good left-handed batter, but he couldn't hit too much right-handed. So I picked up Ray Knight to complement him. And same way with Bachman at second. And Herzog had guys in the bullpen. He had a bunch of left-handers he would bring in for Bachman and Hojo. And when he'd do that in a good situation, I had Knight and Tuffle. And so I knew I had the matchup that I wanted in a certain situation, not his matchups. And it worked out. And I never forget, because Whitey, I would talk into the night with Whitey, learning how he thought. And I remember one night we talked so long, and then I went to bed in the house, and Whitey was outside sleeping on the ground.
Really?
Yeah.
He,
I had
he,
to go wake him up and said, man, let's go fishing. And he
I
was ready.
remember he used to come into our locker room. We used to steal Howard's bats occasionally for,
Oh, yeah. He thought Howard had him plugged. And
you
he had
know,
the umpires take bats from him.
did,
And they'd take him and put him in, umpires would take and put him in the umpire's room. And I'd send a bat boy down there to get him.
maybe in 86, everybody talks about game 6 was a great game, but for me, the game in Houston was the most nerve-wracking for me. I remember going down to the locker room, sitting there from the 8th inning to the 16th. I didn't barely move, and remember that game used Ojeda, Aguilera, McDowell, and Orozco. I think 4 pitchers covered 16 innings. That wouldn't happen today, would it, Davey?
No, but those guys were used to those kind of roles. McDowell was my mainstay because McDowell, he had an unhittable sinker, and he could go out there and throw sinkers and get ground balls all day. I had a guy named Doug Sisk who would either get a ground ball or walk them. And I never panicked when he walked a couple of guys because I knew he was going to still get a ground ball, and he would. So it was, again, using guys in their roles that they could be successful.
David, one of your best moves wasn't on the field, was, the team, everybody was a little worn out from Houston.
That was the greatest series because you have to understand they matched up perfect with us. They had the same strengths in all the areas that we did. And so that was I remember talking to Mel Stottlemyre in one inning. I think we went up 1 run, and I told Mel, there was 2 outs. I said, Mel, it doesn't get any better than that. And at that time, some guy came up and hit a home run to tie the game.
I remember. Speaking of Mel, you know what the most famous picture is? You must have seen it a million times. It's 2 outs, bottom of the 10th inning, lose it by 2 runs. The camera's shown on you and Mel sitting together in the dugout by themselves. Do you know what photo I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember what you were thinking? I know we never gave, but that's getting, how many 2-strike counts do we have? Kid got a hit, Mitch got a hit, Ray got a hit, and Mookie's at bat. But for a while there, it was kind of dark.
We had Schiraldi in the minor leagues, and I knew Schiraldi. He was a tough pitcher. He had some tendencies, and so did Mike Stanley. You're always confident that the guy's going to come through. I was always confident. The guys were probably getting ready to go home. The other team was standing on the top step thinking they won.
We congratulated the Red Sox on the scoreboard.
Right, exactly.
Congratulations, Red Sox. The team in the 86 team is PR guys and kept me hopping. I didn't know what to expect when I got to the ballpark, this, that, and the other thing. How was it managing all these personalities, Keith and Darling and Straw and Doc and Wally and Lenny? There were just so many different personalities you had to contend with.
Well, the main thing, again, when I first came there, the cashier said, boy, we got clicks. Carter's got clicks with guys around him. Hernandez got clicks with guys around him. And everybody's in their own little group. But I felt, I said to them, you guys all have different personalities and whatever. And I said, Hernandez was a captain. And I said, okay, I'm going to hire Carter as a co-captain. And that brought guys more together too. So now that they were both great leaders, Carter leading the pitchers and Hernandez leading the infielders and outfielders on where to play. And it was just, I used the talent and told them, don't keep doing what you're doing, guys. And the main thing about a clubhouse is you want it to be happy. You want guys to want to come into the clubhouse, come in early. And if you have a happy clubhouse, they come in early and they communicate. And that's what we did. And I thought it was what you want to have with every ball club, no matter how talented or whatever.
David, I just got to mention Doc before we go. In 84, in Norfolk, and he had struck out 300 in Lynchburg in 83. You had to fight like heck to bring him on the team. A lot of the people in the front office thought he needed more seasoning, and you had taking the thing that, that, hey, he did all he could do. He's ready to go. And I remember you told him really the last day of spring training that he was on the team.
Yeah, well, first of all, I had Randy Myers. Randy Myers would be throwing the catcher, and half of them would hit the screen behind the catcher, and the other half would be in the strike zone. Well, and I had another guy that was well thought of the same way. This little 17-year-old pitcher came to mound, and he'd sit the catcher on low and away, and about all of them would hit low and away on the strike zone. Then he'd move it to the other side, and he'd throw to the other side. And I remember asking Doc, I said, he was doing this with his fastball. I said, Doc, how do you grip your fastball? Here's a 17-year-old says to me, well, I grip it with the seams when I want to put a little giddy up on it. And then I grip it, when I want a little lateral movement, and I grip it cross seams when I want a little giddy up on it. I said, that'll work. So he was very mentally prepared as well as physically there. So he was ready to pitch in the big leagues. More so than anybody else I could have put on my club. And I had to fight for it with passion.
You didn't back him away from anything, Davey. Hey, one of my other great memories is after from the plane ride, we tore the plane up, and a specific airline wanted us to pay $10,000. And I remember,
I remember that.
You ripped the check up.
Well, no, here was the deal. I think it was, we just came from Houston,
right,
and beat a great club.
Right.
It was a very fought series, and the wives were on the trip home, and they drank beer. And I had a rule on the club, make sure you put your beer cans in paper bags and whatever. I'm not going to keep you from drinking beer on the flight, but make sure you don't leave a messy plane. Well, on that one, the wives had their cans all over everywhere. And so I blamed it on the wives. and I said, and I don't think it was 10,000, it was 5,000. I said, guys, don't worry about it. I'll pay it.
No.
So
and that endeared you to a lot of guys. I know it really truly did. Hey, Davey, I appreciate the time. You've been a good friend all these years, and we'll stay in touch. And if you ever need anything from me, a lot of good memories. I can't believe. So it's 37 years ago in '86, 116 wins. Hasn't been repeated much. Everybody says that series probably one of the best, if not the best, in World Series history. I'm glad you're going to answer one thing. What I always appreciate, Dave, when we dealt. I was still a young kid coming out of college. You trusted me. We talked. You trusted me with information. You took me. You asked my advice on things. I would go back and forth, and that for somebody in my position, it was really invaluable to get me started.
You were the best. You were the best.
Well,
I always trust you. I trusted your opinions.
Yeah,
I trusted you. Had a tough job, the PR director. That's the toughest
especially
job.
with some of our players, Dave.
You
never knew what to expect, but it meant a lot to me. You used to pick my brain, ask for my opinion. And after all these years, I haven't forgotten.